Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talking Logistics, where we have conversations with thought leaders and newsmakers in the supply chain logistics industry. It's my great pleasure to welcome to today's program Tom Nightingale, who's CEO at AFS Logistics, and Martin Verwijmeren, who is CEO and co-founder at MPO. And today we're going to talk about enabling assurance of supply in the global marketplace. So for a long time, companies have been redesigning the supply chain networks and processes to become more demand-driven. But with the disruptions of the past 2 years, however, many companies are now becoming more supply driven. That is, their manufacturing and their sales and promotion plans are being driven more by what parts or inventory they have on hand instead of by customer demand. In fact, in a survey that we conducted with our Indago supply chain research communities, which are supply chain logistics executives for manufacturing, retail, and distribution companies, 58% of them of the respondents said that they were becoming more supply driven in response to current market conditions and challenges. So in short, enabling assurance of supply is as critical as ever. So what are the main challenges? How are logistics service providers helping companies navigate through this challenge? And how is technology helping as well? So those are the main topics and questions we're going to discuss in today's episode. And it's great to have Tom and Martin on the program to share their insights and advice on this topic. So Tom, Martin, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Adrian. It's a pleasure to be with you and discuss this fascinating topic today.
Great. Well, Tom, you and I go back, many years and through your various roles, but now they're at AFS Logistics. In case some folks are not familiar with the company, before we kind of dive in to topics here, why don't you tell us a little bit briefly about AFS Logistics, kind of the types of services you offer and what kind of clients you serve and so forth?
Sure, I'd be delighted to. And it would not be surprising if your viewers and listeners were less familiar with AFS. We are emerging from 39 years of stealth mode. We actually are celebrating our 40th year in business this year. We have about 380 teammates spread across 8 locations in the US and Canada. We've completed about 22 acquisitions and have over 1,800 clients, managing $11 billion in freight audit and payment data, and saving our customers over $180 million a year in total. We really operate across 4 lines of business. Those lines of business are freight audit and payment, as I alluded to, less than truckload, parcel, and our transportation management business unit, which includes our 4PL service, our outsourced managed transportation service, our freight forwarding, and our freight brokerage divisions.
Great. So, a lot of diversity there. I love kind of the almost 40-year-old startup in stealth mode. So obviously a long history of success there, serving a lot of different clients. So obviously you have a pulse on what's going on in the market here with the clients that you work with. So well, let's get to the topic now. I mean, when it comes to enabling assurance of supply, I mean, what are the main challenges that you're hearing from the companies you work with that they're dealing with, and why is it more difficult or more challenging today?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. And I think the challenges that everybody's facing today are not that different from what they've always been in terms of, supply chain professionals trying to balance cost up against customer satisfaction. But the underlying constraints that they have in executing against them and assuring their supply chain, that's the part that's really changed forever. And what I mean by that is, the price of failure for not satisfying a client has never been higher. Buyer expectations are really high, and the next supplier is just really a few mouse clicks away. So that really leads, to an ease of change in suppliers that is really ramping up the pressure on the entire supply chain. And you've got, as a result, buyers who are building inventory, and that assurance that they need to fill their supply chain doesn't come at a low cost. So as they've responded and they've built up inventory levels, you've got CFOs who are keenly aware of their cost of capital now, and they're looking at inventory for what it is. It's waste, and it's tying up capital in their systems, and it's tying up monies. And as a result, they're finding it to be really counterproductive. So they're putting more pressure on the supply chain professionals. And those traditional methods that we've used forever to either defer inventory costs or to use VMI and things like that, or consequently build up inventory and have a lot of safety stock, they're just not working anymore. And particularly as supply chains have gotten longer.
A lot of great points there. I mean, when you talk about kind of the customer satisfaction, customer expectations driving, a lot of this, and how the cost of failure, if you wish, is greater than ever. You also have it from a kind of a resilience standpoint. I mean, one of the things that we've heard from the research that we've done is, companies are also making, they're looking for additional suppliers, to make their supply chains more resilient from a risk management, standpoint. So that's another kind of, dimension to all of this. But you're right. I mean, I think when you look at, it's always been, okay, what's the cost of holding inventory versus the cost of transportation? What is the lead time of transportation then, if you're going to try to be more lean, if you will, if we're going to try to do VMI and all these other strategies, they've all been tossed up in the air, right? Because now there's a lot more unpredictability with lead times because of what's happening in the transportation networks and with just assurance of getting transportation capacity, let's say, and the cost of transportation has been going up. You've got inflation that's going up. That's been something that companies haven't really thought about much or had to think about much in incorporating this. But that's another factor that's coming into play here. So again, I mean, it's like you were. Just to add to what you just said, I mean, this is just, some of the old playbooks just are not going to work anymore, when it comes to this current environment. So, Martin, I mean, a lot of times people look to technology as kind of a silver bullet, type of solution to all of this. And so maybe why don't you, kind of a way to frame this up? I mean, what's been missing historically to help address these challenges? And I think, everyone talks about visibility, but is visibility enough too?
Yeah, let me elaborate a bit on that. And I subscribe to the views Tom just shared. But what we also see is, let's say, 4 trends. So the customer is definitely king. You need to delight the customers or they will walk away. You have a retention problem or might not even sell to them. That means like, your service level should be actually superior to compete in the global market. The second thing is like the competition is global. You can enter into new markets, but others can easily come into yours. Hence, international supply chains, longer supply chains. Then we have also the fact that companies must network, focus on core activities, partner with others in dynamic settings, which also creates a lot of pressure on their ability to be agile in their networking. And fourth, that my background, the cloud is also disrupting business these days in the business-to-business world. Yeah, well, while it did so earlier on in the consumer world, it's now also happening in the B2B world. And therefore, visibility, to come to that, is helpful, but it's definitely not enough. Visibility is helpful to deal with the typical operational process uncertainties. You think of inherent lead time uncertainties or OTIF uncertainties, which are always there, have always been there, and will always be there. But secondly, these days we see more like dynamic networking and dynamic partnerships, different channels, B2B, B2C, direct to consumer, which adds up to the complexity and the dynamics of the challenge in the supply chain. And on top of that, more recently, the more global disruptive global forces like the COVID epidemic, and also the recent war and all those things which are happening these days, which augment basically the challenges as we have it. Visibility helps a bit, but let's also go into what visibility actually is. Yeah? Oftentimes these days, visibility is understood by many professionals as real-time transportation visibility. And, that's a nice beginning, but it's definitely not the end. What we see to really, become helpful for visibility, you need to augment this into the logistics area. So beyond the pure transportation from A to B, have all the operational and physical admin steps from A to Z in scope. Yeah? And beyond that, the logistics visibility needs again be extended to the level of supply chain visibility, where demand becomes visible, supply becomes visible, and also what's in between the inventory in rest and on rest and in transit. And that is quite a challenge. So the real way to improvement is augmenting the visibility from transport to logistics to supply chain visibility, and moving away from what I call passive visibility to active control, to be able to act upon what you actually see in the rear mirror. And then it comes to controlling the orders, purchase orders, sales orders, transfer orders, inventory levels, the related transportation movements, the cost, and so on.
You brought up a good point, because I think you're right. I mean, a lot of the the spotlight, if you will, around visibility over the past, let's say 2-3 years, has been on that real-time freight visibility, right? Where's the truck, where's the order inside that truck, and so forth, and then extending that to ocean and other modes of transportation. But a lot of times when you're talking about supply assurance, I mean, there's a lot of inventory, right? That could be sitting in a warehouse, that could be sitting in a yard, that could be sitting at your supplier's dock, and so forth. So when it comes to this kind of really being able to truly understand and get a complete picture of if you're trying to balance demand with supply, right now, you really have to have a more total view of visibility of supply, which goes beyond just what's in transit or what's inside a truck. And then the other point, I think, something that I think more and more companies are starting to recognize is that visibility is good, but it's not enough. You actually then, what are you going to do with the insights that you get from this visibility? How are you going to optimize? How are you going to automate processes? And so forth. So I think the technology ultimately has to provide that broader visibility, as you alluded to, as well as then provide the mechanism to actually take some intelligent action based on what the visibility is, revealing. So Tom, obviously, I'm assuming, like all, logistics service providers, technology is a big part of your operations, a big part of enabling the value you provide for your company, for your clients. So how are companies such as yourselves, AFS Logistics, helping companies navigate these challenges, and how are technology partners like MPO and others, helping you to enable these solutions?
Yeah, and this is an interesting scenario, because we recognized the looming nature of this problem, and we went out to MP Optics and to a provider that we also have a strong relationship with called Thalia, and devised what we think is an industry first solution to this problem with the relationship that we have between the three providers. And our 4PL product here is really very different than the more classic kind of 4PL or control tower type solution that people have become accustomed to in the industry. And this one is unique in that we actually saw this inventory buildup problem, this inventory carrying cost problem, this cost of capital problem on the horizon, and devised this product anchored around the fact that we will go out and actually purchase the inventory from the manufacturer, placing it very strategically close to the buyer. And by using MP Objects systems so that we can get the buyer demand signals and we can integrate all of those networks, we can then ensure that the buyers have real-time visibility so that they can pull the inventory from a nearby warehouse and they don't have to carry it on their books. The seller, on the other hand, winds up going to a DSO, a day sales outstanding, of 0, literally 0. So as soon as that inventory is purchased, then we purchase, or as soon as that inventory is produced, we purchase the inventory from them, and they wind up with dramatically reduced risk in their system as well. So kind of as an example, to make this a little bit more real, let's say that you have a manufacturer of aircraft engines. Well, obviously that's a very expensive item that they don't want to carry any of their finished goods in their inventory if they can avoid it. So on the other hand, they can take that inventory, they can sell it to AFS Logistics against a guaranteed purchase order for the aircraft manufacturer, who's going to use that engine either in production or in an aircraft on ground scenario. We'll carry that inventory on our books. We will put that in play as soon as that engine is needed by putting it into a warehouse close to the point of consumption, whether it's actually an aircraft, an airport in the case of an aircraft on ground, or a production facility if it's in manufacturing. And we enable all this with MP Objects supply chain orchestration technology. So there's never any doubt as to where the engines are, who owns them, or whether or not they'll be ready at the point of installation. And again, using that 4PL approach, where we're not trying to leverage our assets in every situation. We're not trying to leverage our warehouses in every situation. We're trying to control the actual origin and destination through the combination of everybody else's resources to give us kind of that ultimate playbook relative to being flexible, and I'll enable the consumption and production to match up perfectly.
Yeah, not to, it's very interesting. I mean, I think this is we always talk about the historically for the need to collaborate and find, win-win-win, opportunities, right? And this sounds like a great example there where there's benefits to all the parties that are involved, right? Yourselves as the orchestrator of this, if you will, but there's a supplier and the buyer, as well, in terms of what metrics are important to them in terms of from a financial, standpoint, in particular, so it's kind of aligning, what's important to all the parties and then putting together in place, the processes and the technology, to help enable that. So Martin, going back to you, I mean, I think that's a great example of how, the technology you offer kind of is being implemented in a real world scenario to drive some of the supply assurance and create value for multiple stakeholders. I mean, so what's next from a technology standpoint? I mean, what capabilities beyond what's there today will drive the next level of innovation?
Yeah. First of all, I would like to mention that with the partnership, we are already, frontliners in this world and driving the innovation. It's truly amazing how the triangle of inventory and orders and transportation is being dealt with in the solution that Tom just managed, where all these decision factors are taken into account to relieve basically the buyer and the seller from the burden of inventory, and just use the just-in-time principles also over longer global networks and reduce lead times through, let's say, granular visibility and also actionable control to condense basically the supply chain and create the benefits for all the parties involved here. Beyond that, we see, let's say, more planning and execution convergence, where that in the past was like a different world. We had like execution transactional systems and planning systems doing a kind of periodic job. We see the convergence happening. We labeled this the triple I planning. It should be integral over multiple echelons, multiple processes, multiple parties. It should be intelligent, using smart algorithms, and it also should work instantly. So not just like monthly or weekly, but actually by the hour or in the second, in the moment, basically. Yeah? Beyond that, the other things which come up is like more advanced integration, so community integration. Think of web services, APIs, which make the interactions more real time as an enabler to get out more. That's not a technology which can be supported by anybody, in particular the smaller players. You also want to enable them to become part of the game. So mobile apps and Internet of Things, so direct communication to actors in the field is also important to complete the game. On the planning side, technology side, we use more advanced algorithms, artificial intelligence, so multi-decision optimization functions with complex constraints to get out more than the human brain can comprehend. And on top of that, obviously, the machine learning and even deep learning, where you learn from experience and let the machine basically learn from experience automatically to improve the algorithms. And finally, what I also see is that the optimization is not being done solely against customer service and cost. We also these days have added the word impact to the equation, which means like maybe non-monetary impact. So think of carbon footprint, greenhouse gases, ESG impact, and those can be figured into the overall outcome and can be used to, in hindsight, basically measure what was the impact, but also can be used upfront to make deliberate choices or let the customer choose what options are available with different, let's say, sustainability impacts. but also to go automatically for lowest sustainability impact, if that might be like a consideration.
Yeah, a lot of great points there. I like the when you talked about the 3 I's, I like the integrated part of it. One of the things that we've in some of the research that we've done, when we've asked companies, what's been kind of one of the biggest hurdles or constraints to becoming more resilient, to doing some of these things that we've been talking about, near the top of the list, and in many cases, the top of the list is, we lack cross-functional optimization capabilities, right? So, this problem that has historically companies have wrestled with, which is, operating in silos, right? And not only operating in silos within their own enterprise, but then also operating in silos even across their business partners. So I think one of the things that they're looking for from a technology standpoint that they're lacking, that said, hey, we don't have the capability to optimize across, our different functional, whether it's transportation management, warehouse management, supply chain planning, so forth, right? So kind of having that layer of technology, of optimization technology that really spans across the different functional processes and trading partners, I think is what's going to open the door to the next wave of business process, innovation and business benefits there. And I think the other part that you brought up that I think is important is, bringing in that long tail of trading partners, suppliers, carriers, logistics service providers, and the like, with web services and APIs and mobile technologies and all these things. I think that's going to be something that's going to continue to be more and more important, moving forward.
One more thing which comes to mind, just to complete the story. In traditional platforms or systems landscapes, you see that you have transaction systems and analytic systems or data warehouses or BI tools. We see also the merger of those. So what we have done, we have invested a lot to have analytics right away on the transactions, and from the analytics basically right away be able to improve on the detailed transactions from the aggregate level to the individual transaction level, because data lakes, which are kind of offline, do not provide the potential to really, intercept exceptions and optimize in the moment.
Right. So it goes back to that other I that you talked about, which is the instantaneous, right? Aspect of it. So that's obviously a key enabler there. So as a way to wrap up, then, and Tom, I'll start with you, and then Martin, you can provide your thoughts. I mean, Tom, what advice would you give to other companies that are just getting started, kind of rethinking their approach to inventory management, transportation management, and these other aspects of, that make up supply assurance? I mean, how should they get started? Any mistakes that they should avoid?
Yeah, I would say there's really 3 things. First, don't assume that the old models are the only models. VMI was great in 1980 when Michael Dell perfected it. It was a different world. It was a different supplier and buyer balance. So those are not the only models that exist. Secondly, I would say don't assume that the models are free. Somebody will bear a cost of that inventory somewhere in the system. The goal really should be to make sure that the costs are transparent and that they're fair. And then last, I would say don't do it alone. There are trained professionals who operate state-of-the-art systems like an MP Objects with the best financial backers in the world, who have lower cost of capital and can help you do this. And trying to do this the way that you read it in a supply chain management book in undergrad in the 90s is probably not going to be the way that gets it done anymore.
That's a great point. Your last point there kind of reminds me of a question I always used to ask my executive MBA students when I taught back in the day. And I would say, what do you think the shelf life of a supply chain textbook is, these days? And I think the consensus was maybe about 2 years. There's certainly some fundamentals of supply chain that never change and are always going to be true. But, the reality is that, this is such a dynamic, highly changing environment on the technology front, the regulations front, the economic front, so many different areas that, you do, to your point, relying on old playbooks may not be the wisest thing or may no longer be valid. You have to continuously innovate and find ways to collaborate with partners, whether it's logistics partners and technology partners that can, help you achieve your objectives there. Martin, anything to add there?
Yeah, so our advice is that you should act upon, let's say, authentic anxiety, like the recognition that it cannot continue as longer as you have worked so far. Yeah, and from that basically drive change. And change comes in the form of investment in technology, call it supply chain digitization, but also putting the right organization in place. And there, obviously, you need to choose what you can do yourself, or you can best maybe knock on the door of the top logistics service providers like AFS Logistics to get things done with you, basically, to go faster and deeper and easier. Whatever the effort you take and whatever the route you take, our advice is always like start soon with simple, small steps. Don't try to boil the ocean. Also, make use of best practices and solution templates, which companies like AFS Logistics and MPO do have in their respective areas. And with those efforts, you will soon also be able to create value. So go for fast implementations. Deliver every quarter. Don't think of, let's say, lengthy waterfall multi-year projects. No. Scope it well and start seeing and showing the benefits and create more appetite to go for the next iteration. And the third one I once brought up on a conference, which was kind of meant like a joke, but it does have does make some sense. It has some value, is to forget about the silos in the traditional world of, on the one hand, the inventory guys, and on the other hand, the transportation guys. Typically in logistics and supply chain, those are different worlds, different professions, and we should forget about that. I then said, and it's still, I think, valid, like, inventory is transport at the speed of 0. And transportation is like inventory on the move. So forget about transportation and inventory, but think in flows. Everything is flow. And we need to make sure that the flow is optimized from start to end. And once in a while, you can stop the flow, you can merge the flow, you can split the flow, but everything is flow. In order to do so, you need experts. On the one hand, supported by technology. On the other hand, also experts who really master the end-to-end services, like in the company of Tom, AFS Logistics.
Well, a lot of great advice from both of you. I love that. I may have to borrow that. I'll give you credit, Martin, of course, but I love that, breaking down the barriers between inventory and transportation and thinking about it from a standpoint of flow. I hadn't really, it sounds obvious, but I think it's a good way to, think about it, moving forward. Sometimes it just takes that kind of just a slight change in perspective to really get the creativity and the innovation, going. So again, both of you, thank you very much for making the time and sharing your insights and advice on this very important and timely topic. So Tom, Martin, again, thank you.
Thank you, Adrian.
Thanks, Adrian.
I want to thank those of you that joined us. If you're watching this episode on demand, either at the MPA Objects website or on Talking Logistics, and you've got a question for Tom or Martin, you can post it there. And I'm sure they'll be more than happy to respond via that medium. Again, thank you for joining us and look forward to seeing you in a future episode of Talking Logistics. Have a great day.